In the past 10 years or so, we have been living in a world of video game remakes, let's be honest. Every classic game receives at least a remaster or a remake since the 8th console generation was introduced with the PS4. Nostalgia is literally rampant in the gaming world. This is clearly shown also by the number of indie game designers creating PS1 style games, whether just for the entertainment of the gaming audience or for commercial release. And we cannot overlook a rather amusing but heartwarming thing that has emerged in the recent years. This is the so-called PlayStation 1 Demakes. Whereas a twist, modern games are recreated as if they were released on the PlayStation 1. Even if the recreation is just for the sake of a few clips of scenes from a game, this trip to an alternate gaming past of what could have been is a must for every PlayStation 1 nerd. And because I'm such a nice guy, I have gathered a collection of the most notable examples of these demakes for you. Set in the mid-40th century France during the 100 Years' War, the game focuses on the unfortunate situation of Amicia de Rune and her ill brother Hugo as they flee from soldiers of the French Inquisition and from hordes of rats that are spreading the Black Plague. The player controls Amicia using a combination of stealth and limited tools to hide from, distract or knock out soldiers, evade rat hordes and solve puzzles, incorporating elements of survival horror games. The remake operates with a fixed camera system, reminiscent of classic survival horror games. Our protagonists and the French town are perfectly pixelated, just as a PlayStation 1 game should be. However, they might be too detailed and the animations are too smooth, but it still could easily pass as an early 2000s, more advanced late PlayStation 1 game. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a 2010 survival horror adventure game developed and published by Frictional Games. The game features a protagonist named Daniel exploring a dark and foreboding castle called Lundbjörk while trying to maintain his sanity by avoiding monsters and unsettling events. Actually, the PlayStation 1 would have been the perfect platform for Amnesia. A lot of first-person games were released for the console back in the day, and even if people don't like aiming with a joypad, here you wouldn't even need to do that as it's not a fast-paced game. You just had to immerse yourself. And on top, the game's atmosphere could have turned the PlayStation 1 limitations to its advantage with its dark corridors. The main story is set in the West Indies during the golden age of piracy in the early 1700s. It follows the notorious Welsh pirate Edward Kenway. By the way, he's the grandfather of the protagonist in Assassin's Creed 3, so he searches for fortune and a mythical location called the Observatory, which is sought by both the Assassins and the Templars. A major plot element concerns the attempted establishment of an independent pirate republic in the Caribbean as well. See, I'm not a huge Assassin's Creed fan. Okay, I haven't actually played any of the games, but isn't it captivating how they handle the ship scenes compared to the original? Classic. Also, the standard gameplay, because of the stealth elements, is inspired by Metal Gear simply. Just brilliant. Bloodborne is played from a third-person perspective. Players control a customizable protagonist and the gameplay is focused on strategic weapon-based combat and exploration. Players battle varied enemies by using items such as trick weapons and firearms, exploring different locations, interacting with non-player characters, and unrevealing the city's mysteries. Alright, there is really nothing more to say here. The video speaks for itself, and the full remake is available for free on PC. I'll go ahead and pin it as a comment down below. This is honestly incredible, and thank you for this experience again, whoever developed this, you're an absolute legend. The story follows Jacob Lee, a starship captain who survives a crash landing on the jovial moon Callisto, only to be captured and incarcerated against his will in a high-security prison. He is then forced to fight for survival when a mysterious illness sweeps the prison and gradually learns the dark secrets of his captors. The gameplay has players exploring a series of levels, gathering resources and collecting data logs while fighting off infected prisoners. The original game wasn't all that successful either, but when translated into the PlayStation 1 world, where you actually have to play the game and not rely on QT events to dictate the combat, it all feels pretty clunky. Well, of course. The remake itself is incredibly charming and faithfully reflects the many somewhat uninspired and empty PlayStation 1 games that were released for the console during its lifetime. But it's still, you know, just fun stuff. The player assumes the role of V, a mercenary who accidentally gets enhanced with a cybernetic biochip containing an engram of legendary rockstar and terrorist Johnny Silverhand. As Johnny's behavior and memories begin overwriting V's, the two must work together to separate from each other and save V's life. Alright, we are getting two Demake versions of this. One is a classic Doom-like first-person shooter with the driving scenes inspired by the first two Grand Theft Auto games with a top-down view. The second version leans more towards the early From Software and Bethesda games in terms of first-person shooter perspective. Also, just to lean into the more funny side, they even recreated some bugs for authenticity. Set on a mining spaceship overrun by deadly monsters called the Necromorphs, following the discovery of an artifact called the Marker. The player controls an engineer called Isaac Clarke as he navigates the spaceship and fights the monsters while struggling with growing psychosis. The gameplay has Isaac exploring different areas through its narrative, solving environmental puzzles and finding ammunition and equipment to survive. Alright, the Demake essentially replicates the original gameplay with one key difference: fixed camera angles, just like in a classic PlayStation 1 survival horror game. Actually, this is more charming to me than the original. This has also got a playable demo, by the way. I put it next to the Bloodborne link in the comments. Enjoy. The game is set in the United States following a almost world-ending event which caused destructive creatures to begin roaming the earth. Players control Sam Porter Bridges, a courier tasked with delivering supplies to isolated colonies and reconnecting them via wireless communications network. If I saw this on the PlayStation 1 for the first time, it might be the least appealing game to me, to be honest. Well, after all, Death Stranding is fundamentally empty due to its post-apocalyptic setting and it has a slower gameplay pace. The original game was divisive for these reasons as well, and it seems like it wouldn't be any different in the 90s. Elden Ring is an action role-playing game presented through a third-person perspective with players freely roaming its open world. Players can use several types of weapons and magic spells, including non-direct engagement enabled by stealth mechanics. Throughout the game's world, checkpoints enable fast travel and allow players to improve their attributes using an in-game currency called runes. Unlike the Bloodborne remake, this one uses classic survival horror fixed camera system, but it faithfully adapts Elden Ring's brutal gameplay. This camera system was quite polarizing even in the 90s. What do you think? Would you be up for a fixed camera Souls-like game? After all, it would increase the challenge even further, which is a deep-rooted part of these kind of games, right? And that was the video for today. If you made it this far, you might want to consider subscribing and liking this video. I was Gabe and I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, keep gaming.